Hello, I'm Captain Rick Riles, and it's time for the Florida Sportsman Action Spotter podcast. Here's what we're going to do. First, we need to check in with Costa Rica. Holy smokes, I just came back from there last night, and man, do we have some stories to tell. Then we're going to head up to Northeast Florida, work our way down the coast, through the Keys, up the West Coast, out the Panhandle. If there's a fish caught in the state of Florida, we've heard about it, and we're going to bring it to you over the next several minutes. Now, settle back, get your cold drink, and get ready. And the Florida Sportsman Action Spotter is brought to you each and every week by Yamaha. Reliability starts here. By Shimano, bringing people and nature together. By Tournament Master Chum, the best chum on earth. By Nosara Paradise Rentals, your dream marlin vacation. By D.O.A. Lures, the unfair advantage. And by Young Boats. You want the finest in flat span offshore hybrids? You need to check out youngboats.com. Hey, I just got back from Nosara Paradise, and here I am landing again to have a nice cool drink with Craig Sutton. Craig, everything you said about your place there at Nosara was spot on. One of the great billfish destinations in the world.
Yeah, it really is, Ricky, and we're lucky to have you as an angler on one of our boats. You know, very rarely we get a few good anglers, but nobody quite your caliber.
Oh, dude. Yeah, I'm hearing you. I was about to say I can't say much for your anglers last week, but your captains did an amazing job of overcoming.
Yeah. It's August. People don't understand how good August is. I mean, it really is. We got boats fishing today and then a few trips this next week, but it's pretty much we're wrapping up our year, and it's a doggone shame because this is some of the best fishing of the year. But it's just there's not really any fishing destinations that have demand in September and October, which is our rainy season. But the fishing's still good. But Alaska's about the only place people want to go to in September and October. But
Craig, I hate to sound like a Chamber of Commerce for Nosara or a shill for one of my sponsors, but it's not hot. I don't know why I feel that way. I'm gonna tell you what, I've been a whole lot hotter in Jacksonville, Florida than I have been in Costa Rica in August.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, in August it's in the mid 80s, and it's a really beautiful. It's their fall. It's opposite seasons, but yeah, and the fishing. I mean, you sampled it, dude. That day you had, should be right there at one of your top fishing days ever.
But Craigie, it is, but I've got to tell you what you gave me. All right. You gave me a sight. Well, I'd never seen it, but I'd seen stuff close to it. But your captain, who amazed me, Alex, on the Harvester. All right. We found a buoy, which can happen to anybody, a broken navigational marker floating. And it was everything that you find under a buoy off Mayport times 100. But I will never forget, two things about that I'll never forget. First off, my son caught his blue marlin dragging a yellowfin tuna around that buoy. But more importantly, Craig, we pulled up to that buoy on the second day, and we didn't put the lines out. We pulled up to it to see what would come out. 4 mahi came out, Craig. They were all 45 to 55. I've never seen a sight like that in my life.
Yeah, we get some big mahi, especially this time of year.
Whew.
Especially this time of year. Yeah, y'all caught some nice big ones.
We sure did.
You had on that one. I mean, I've been trolling in the blue water for a long time. My biggest is a 48. I think you guys got a couple a little bigger than that. But
that's right. We beat that twice in the same day. But
yeah, that's nice, man.
It was just incredible. And our friend Heidi, and she's from Jacksonville, and you know that she's faced a personal tragedy lately. And oh my gosh, when that blue marlin took off jumping on her, her tragedy was a million miles away. I can promise you.
Yeah, that was good, man. That made me feel good. I knew what she's been going through too, and I knew she told me before when she booked, she said she wanted to do a marlin. I said, well, this is about as good a time as you can get. I don't think there's a better time, than this time of year for us. I hope the bite stays good next week. I mean, I get there Wednesday. I'm gonna fish Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and then come home Sunday. I wish I could spend more time, but I have a job to do.
I'm not sure
you're.
I'm
not on the maintenance.
I'm not sure you're going to get any work done. I'm just not.
Oh, I am. I got to. And we got to get started on the maintenance on those boats. And those guys, they're ready to go on vacation. William's done 265 trips. Alex has done 240.
Whew.
I mean, in 9 months, Alex in the month of June had no days off. The guys on the Discover, Pio and Kevin, didn't have any days off. William had 3 days off just because we needed to do some maintenance work on this boat. So, it was, and the Explorer, I think, had 2-3 days off the whole month. These guys are ready to, get off the water and relax a little bit. I'm sure of that.
Well, let me give you 2 more quick stories. One of them is on your boy Alex on the Harvester. We found this buoy late in the afternoon, so he said, "Can you guys stay late? Can you stay late?" And, of course, we said, "Yeah, we can stay late," before we ever got close to it. And then, of course, we hook up a 300-pound blue one, and late becomes later. And we finally get done fishing. He says, "Okay, we got to go." And I'm set, Craig. We're leaving. So immediately his mate, Wilson, grabs the spinning rod and throws a jig at the buoy. And I'm like, wait a minute, I'm confused. And he reels in a little yellowfin. Oh, no, actually, it was a little bonita. And I said, wait a minute, I'm confused. We're going? We're not going? And he said, oh, yeah, we're going, but it's going to take us 10 minutes to get ready to go. We're not going to waste that. So they sew that bonita on and put it back out. Now, that's after fishing 240 days, Craigie.
I know. Those guys will love it. They do. They all love it. I tell people they got 3 things in their life. They got their family, their faith, and fishing.
That's right.
And it's in that order. And they don't have the NFL or baseball or any of that. They got fishing's everything to them, and they love being the top dogs in the community. And our guys, I mean, the next place boat in our community will do maybe 60 trips a year. Those guys do 6 times or 4 times that many trips every year, every single year. I mean, and our system is just, it's a perfect nirvana for them. All they got to do is fish and maintain that boat.
Yeah. But I got to tell you,
and they produce.
If you're wondering if you're fishing in the right place, I saw a nice little, I think it was a 37 bill fisher come by me the other day, and I looked over the name of it. It was the Silverado. It was Gary Carter's boat.
Gary Carter's. Yeah.
I think we're in the right spot.
It's just like, well, listen, that's a nice boat. Don't get me wrong. I love Gary Carter. He's a class act, absolutely, in every respect. But, those guys, they fish a lot, but they're, I think they're probably doing 60 trips, 70 trips a year.
Is that right? I'll be darned.
Yeah, he does all those, but all his trips come out of La Ventana, that development. The people buy into that, and they get X number of days a year on the boat or some kind of deal like that. But Gary Carter's a class act, absolutely a class act, no question about it.
Well, buddy, I tell you what, I may become a pest to you very soon, because that's best fishing I've ever seen. I like that. I like that fishing better than I liked Venezuela in its glory days. And I was there for when La Guerra Bank was taken off.
We got David Voorhees coming home tomorrow. David's been blistering. You ought to see that. Did you see that rooster he caught?
Yeah, I didn't, but he texted me about it as soon as he did. He had a rooster and a big cubera yesterday.
Yeah. The rooster, it looks like it's 60, 65 pounds. That's a big one, a really big one. Cubera, it was a nice fish, a real nice fish, but, that rooster definitely one to hang your hat on. That's a super nice fish.
Well, I'm going to tell you what, I was there with my oldest son, and we'll never, ever, ever forget it.
That's good times. Hard to replicate that, brother.
Just a whole experience. I can't thank you enough, Craigie. I'm going to tell you, folks, you want to have the trip of a lifetime. Nosara truly is the place for you. We'll check in with you next week, Craigie. I want to hear how you do. I expect to be outfished, Craigie. We only had like 8 sailfish and 2 blue marlin, a couple of 50-pound Dorados, a few around 48. So I'm laying it to you to be better. All right, I want you to be better than that next week.
Hold your breath. I'm heading down there.
Talk to you next week, Cap. We appreciate you.
Thank you, Ricky.
Craig Sutton from Nosara Paradise Fishing. All right, let's move on down the East Coast just a little bit. Now, our buddy David Voorhees is still in Nosara, so I checked in with Captain Robert Johnson today, and he let me know that inshore this week, the mangrove snapper everywhere in Florida is talking about the abundance of mangrove snapper this year. They obviously had a great spawn. A lot of 12 and 13-inch fish in the waterway near St. Augustine. Flounder is still doing very, very well. Offshore, the kingfish have backed off a little bit, but the mangrove snapper and vermilion snapper and gag grouper. The gag grouper are starting to trickle back into our area. Captain Robert reported that there were quite a few caught by his two boats over the last week. Now, most of them are still deep. They're out in around 140 feet of water, but at least it's a start on rebuilding our grouper population. So let's take a little trip down the East Coast and check in with our buddy Jim Ross in the Rockledge area with the East Central Report. All right, now let's head on down the state just a little bit to the East Central region and check in with our main man, Captain Jim Ross. Jim, how are you?
Doing good, Rick. How are you doing this week?
Outstanding. Absolutely. Just got back from Costa Rica. Are you kidding me?
Oh, you're doing fantastic.
Yes,
yeah,
I am.
I just got back from Homosassa. Went over there and did a little scalloping. And
how about that?
Enjoyed the heck out of that. So
how was it?
Nice little getaway. It was terrible the first day. We were just not in the scallops at all. Second day we did good though. We redeemed ourselves.
Okay. All right. As long as you got it done, that's what counts.
Yep. Yeah, the first day we kind of ran out of time. We were kind of fighting weather. We had a thunderstorm that started to kick up, and me and lightning, we just don't mix. So,
it took me a long time to find the cure to where I didn't worry about lightning anymore, and boy, it just made my life easier. Back when I was running the big boat, I found a cure, and it worked perfect.
What's that? Just stay at the dock?
No. I called the mate up on the bridge, went and crawled in the bunk and pulled the covers over my head.
Oh, well, that'll work.
Didn't bother me a bit after that.
Yeah.
Hey, I got a question for you.
What's that?
Best trip ever, being as I'm coming off the best trip ever. You could replay one day in your fishing career, and you got to pick a single day. Give me one day.
Okay. Well, there's so many, but I would say one of the ones that's the most memorable is when my son was about 7 or 8 years old. We went to the Keys, and the wind was blowing 30 knots every day, gusting even higher. Well, one day it was gusting to gale force. Just horrible conditions, and we couldn't go anywhere. We couldn't do anything. I mean, and it was one of those things. We kind of beat our way out of Islamorada over to one of the very first couple of islands over there, and we had what turned into the world's smallest mangrove snapper competition. So, because, I was like, I caught one. And then my son was like, I caught one. I caught another one. I caught another one. I'm beating you, Dad. He's very, very competitive, right?
Oh,
very
yeah.
Competitive. So then it turned into, I can catch a bigger one than you, So he's like, look, mine's bigger than yours, Dad. You can't catch one this big. And then so I caught one bigger. And then it turned into, well, I can catch one smaller than you, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we sat there against this little bank tucked up behind. We're behind the Crab Keys. We were tucked up in behind the bank, and we were just sitting there casting at this bush that was in the water, had 400 mangrove snapper under it at least. And so I said, it turned into the world's smallest snapper competition. But what we did that day was so much fun because the conditions were horrible. We couldn't go do anything we wanted to go do, and yet we had more fun picking at one another. And he'd catch one smaller than me, and he'd be throwing his arms up in there. Woo! Look at that one, Dad! Can't beat that one, And then I'd catch one smaller, and I'd run around the boat, smacking my butt like I'm riding a pony. And who's your daddy? Who's your daddy? That. And of course he would start off fussing because he was only 7 or 8, So he would start off fussing, saying that it's not fair. You're cheating, because that's how little kids act.
Sure.
And then, I'm like, hey, man, you better man up because you can't catch anything sitting there fussing and crying. Like, of course, then me running around, right like I'm riding the pony and doing all this who's your daddy stuff. Of course, just making a fool of myself. He just broke down and just started busting out laughing. He's like, Dad, I'm thinking, he's thinking, Dad, you're a complete idiot, which he's pretty much right, But we had the biggest time doing that. And, for Christmas, they gave me a picture of me holding this little 4-inch snapper. It's the same size as about a Bass Assassin sea shad.
Right.
And I'm holding this little thing, and they gave it to me with a caption underneath it. They had wrapped it up and put it in a little frame. It said, Captain Jim Ross with his world record mangrove snapper.
Jim, you hit a nerve with me that I have been. In fact, I just wrote an article about it that we're going to publish in Florida Sportsman. Fish are what you make them.
Yes.
We had the marketing manager for North America, Frank Wilhelm, and his son. This story goes back almost 20 years now, when the kid was 4 years old. And we headed offshore. We were headed to 21 Fathoms, and we're going to try and get, Frank and his wife a sail and all this. And as soon as we leave the jetties, we can see that the kid is nervous, And my buddy realizes that this is not going to work. And he says, Cap, we're not very far from that wreck up north that those tuna, a few years ago, it was this week in April when they moved in there. I knew exactly what he was doing. I knew there were bonita at a wreck about 4 miles north of there.
Yeah.
I said, oh, those fish are long gone. He goes, well, I don't know. We won't know if we don't check. I'm, oh, man, I don't want to. We're not going to get a bite up there. Well, you can guess the end of the story. The drags get backed off and the clickers get turned on, and all of a sudden, we're on. Come on, Jeremy, fight him. And so the kid goes back, but of course you can't take tuna. They're protected, so we have to let him go. And that one looks like he weighs about 80 pounds. And I mean, Jim, the moral of the story is fish are what you make them.
Exactly.
If you're looking for a sailfish bite and a 15-pound dolphin comes up there and eats the bait, you can be disgruntled, or you can point out the colors and look at the jumps and, oh, come on, let's get your picture. Let's get your picture with your mom. Let's get your picture with your dad. You understand where I'm going, right?
Yeah, I know exactly where you're going.
Yeah. I mean, fish are what we make them. And when you've got guests with you, I'll give you one quick one, and then we're going to go. The first year we moved down here, a sweet old man took us fishing, and we caught a 14-pound bonita. Now, we had just moved here from Wisconsin. That became the Riles family bonita. We put him in the freezer whole, okay? And when all our friends would come down from Wisconsin to get out of the winter, we'd take out the Riles family tuna, right? And we'd all take pictures with it, okay? For us just moving from Wisconsin, Jim, that was a great fish.
Yeah.
And fish are what you make them, buddy. I mean, you can take your customers out there and you can complain because the Jack Crevalles ate you up when you were trying to catch snook, or you can spend your day pointing out that that's the strongest 5-pound fish you ever caught.
Exactly.
Yep.
Exactly. They are what you make them. But we relive that day often.
I'll bet.
And for years, when you walk into my house, now I've caught some decent fish. If
Indeed.
you know what I'm saying.
You've caught some great fish.
I've caught some decent ones. But the first thing that you saw when you walked into my house for many years was that picture of that little mangrove snapper right inside the doorway, and that was the first thing you saw when you walked in. And Justin used to, even when he was 10, 11, 12, hey guys, you guys want to see my dad's world record snapper? Mm-hmm. And he'd bring the kids over and show them this little tiny thing. It was barely big enough to put on. In fact, I cut a sabiki rig and snelled, or not snelled, but put a double uni knot to the sabiki, the leader off the sabiki rig, And that's how I caught that small snapper, because I didn't have any hooks in the boat that small, so I had to get a sabiki rig out. But, you know, just great times with kids and just enjoying the heck out of ourselves being out there and just, you know, just enjoying whatever the day was able to give us.
There you go.
And
There's the key.
I think we've lost sight of a lot of that. But, you know, there's enough of us out there that have done those sorts of things to try and pass it on to the rest of the people, and hopefully they can then in turn pick it up and, you know, run with that flaming torch, if you will, and make somebody in their life happy over a fish that may not seem to be the greatest thing in the world, but turns out to be absolutely the best one ever.
Yep. Great story, Jim. Thank you so much for it. And one more thing, your hair was blacker back then. I'm certain of it.
And a lot thicker.
Thank you, buddy. Talk to you next week.
Take care, Rick.
Captain Jim Ross. Well, you know, we got tied up telling stories with Jim Ross. Didn't get a great East Central report this week, so we need to get the word from Captain John Earhart, who texted me while I was over in Costa Rica and said the sailfish are everywhere. What, were you taunting me, John, or are they really there?
You know, they must have knew you were heading out of town and you weren't going to be able to come down, because I got to tell you, right around that August full moon, there was some phenomenal sailfishing to be had.
How about that?
I was seeing sailfish as shallow as 40 feet, and I was seeing sailfish out as deep as 150 feet. And it seems like right now, anywhere 40 feet to 150 feet of water, if there's a little bit of sardines around, there's going to be a dozen sailfish kind of corralling up those bait schools and feeding pretty actively throughout the entire day. You know, around the full moon, it seems like the bite's going to be best right around midday. But, I mean, pretty much everywhere I went, we were seeing sailfish, you know, and they were pretty willing to eat a live bait. Drifting or bump trolling with mylar dredges is definitely going to give you plenty of action. There's a lot of kingfish mixed in. Believe it or not, we actually have some good wahoo action right around this August full moon. That's pretty typical every August in Stewart. You know, we're not getting monsters, but we're seeing fish, you know, 40 to 60 pounds, and that's pretty consistent around the August full moon. Make sure you got a little bit heavier tackle and maybe a heavier wire leader on there, so that when you do hook one of these nice wahoos, you do stand a chance of getting him to the boat before he cuts you off.
Yeah, I was blessed with a 70 down there on that August moon, John. Trolling one of those Yozuri Bonita plugs.
Yeah, that'll get them.
Yeah. I was a great fish. One of my best, certainly one of my best wahoo ever. How about mullet? You seen any mullets yet?
We're starting to see a few mullet around. They've been pretty hard to come by, so I'm going to say the mullet run hasn't started yet. I cast netted maybe a dozen larger black mullet the other day for one of my charters on an inshore trip. You know, when we were trolling those mullet around in the channels for about 2 minutes, and then we hooked 100-pound tarpon. So if you can get the mullet right now, you're going to catch giant snook and giant tarpon. You know, and as the mullet run kind of progresses as we get closer to September, it's only going to get better and better here in Stewart.
That's fantastic. What a great report. John, we appreciate it so much. Please tell me we can check with you next week.
Yes, sir. I look forward to telling you more next week.
I look forward to it. Captain John Earhart from the Mayhem and the Chaos in Stewart. And now, let's hear a word from Shimano. The year was 1953 when one of the true pioneers of big game fishing hung it up. It wasn't one of us guys. It was none other than Ernest Hemingway. I just don't want to do it anymore, he's credited with saying. The tackle has been so sophisticated, the fish just don't have a chance. Can you imagine if you could walk Ernest Hemingway through the aisles of one of the Strike Zone stores today, show him the latest and greatest from Shimano? Can you imagine handling him a Saragossa spinner that weighed less than his bait and could put more torque on a rampaging tuna than the giant old reels of his day? No, Ernest, I'm afraid you left us way too early, buddy. The fights with great fish still go on today, and we still sometimes get beat. But if I were a sea monster of your day, I think I'd still rather do battle with you than face the tools that Shimano has stocked in Strike Zone some 68 years later. Our thanks to John Earhart for a great Stewart report. Now let's hop on down to Miami, check in with the mayor of South Beach, Captain Alan Sherman. Alan, are you with us?
I am with you, Rick. How you doing?
I'm doing outstanding, my boy. Doing outstanding. Tell me about your August fishing.
It is hot, man. Yep. I mean, it is brutally hot here in South Florida, and it's definitely affecting the fishing. So, off the reef, like where you would normally look for sailfish, kingfish, tunas, bonitas, all of those fish are there, but they're not very hungry because the water's so hot. And the fish that are there, they're not there in big numbers. Most of the guys this whole past week, and I look forward to it continuing, are looking for dolphin offshore. They returned. They're anywhere from 700 feet out to 1,800 or more. But to catch them, you really have to put some time in, meaning you have to look for them, and you can't just stay in one depth. You got to keep changing your depths, hundreds of feet at a time, of locating something that's holding the fish. Mm-hmm. And that's been the key. There hasn't been weed lines everywhere. There hasn't been big patches of weeds, but there has been weeds and patches and floating debris once you find that right current rip depth. And, sometimes you're in blue water, really good looking stuff, but you're not really in the Gulf Stream. You're not in when that current's moving 3, 4, 5 knots. You're on an edge, a color change, but it's not the right one. So if you keep pushing further offshore, there's a good chance you're going to hit where these fish are, where all that debris is. It's holding the fish. And once you find it, there's a lot of small fish, but there's been enough legal size fish, some gaffers up to maybe 10, 15 pounds, to make it worth your while. What we're seeing are the guys that are targeting swordfish. They get them during the daytime out here off of Miami in 1,800 feet of water. They're finding dolphin. So that's telling you how far offshore some of these fish are. Not all of them are that far offshore. The swordfish are, but the guys are encountering them in 700 feet. It just depends on where that Gulf Stream edge moves into and where the weed lines have accumulated.
Alan,
go ahead.
How far a run is it off Miami to get to 1,800 feet?
That's a good question, Rick. It's not too often that I'm out there that far.
Uh-huh.
So, I got a bay boat. It's 24 feet now because I have a new boat, but it used to be 22, and all of them were 22 bay boats. So it was a rarity that I would be that far off. And because I'm an inshore fisherman, it's a hard question for me to answer. But I will tell you, you won't be seeing land once you're out there.
Okay. All right. That tells me it's further than 10 miles. So that's
for sure.
I don't think I want to mess with that then. Yeah. It's crazy how the deep water kind of meanders. You get off Palm Beach, you can throw a rock to it. You get off Jacksonville at 68 miles before you can even think about it. I mean, it just kind of meanders around the state, which I see advantages both ways. People ask me all the time. They say, wouldn't you love to be in South Florida where you run 2 miles and you're in 500 feet of water? I'm like, no, I don't want that, because every boat in my area has to make a living in that same 2 miles, right?
Well, that's true. But in our case, I mean, really, you're talking 2 miles and you could be in 500 feet of water. But most of our good fishing, is done inside of that.
Right.
It's closer to the reef, because once you get past that reef, the outer reef, which drops off to 90 feet, and then it's just sand, unless you come across, an artificial reef, it's just sand out there, and sand really doesn't hold a lot of quality fish, not on the surface anyway. So most of our best fishing is inshore that, and yes, it is populated.
Yeah,
and that's why I like to fish weekdays.
That's why I love to fish Jacksonville. We got 68 miles of reef before we get to the continental shelf, and it breaks off. So for us, we get to hit spots sometimes that don't get hit every day. So it's a trade-off, like everything in fishing. It's a compromise. Hey, I got a question for you.
Sure.
You can relive one day of your fishing career. Okay? Pick it. What made it so? What'd you catch, or what made it so special?
All right. You as well as me and all the other guys that are podcasters, we have the ability to be on the water many days a week for many years. We all have a lot of time on the water behind us, and we've come across so many incredible fishing trips that it's really difficult to put your finger on one. And if you did, you might be shorting out another one that was even better or meant more. But for me, it's about family.
Right.
And I had a trip maybe 5-6 years ago. My daughter was engaged to a guy, and he joined us on this trip. He's now her husband. And we were in Key West, and we went to the Marquesas Keys. And I've been out there before, but didn't really ever spend much time out there. And this just happened to be one of those special trips. The weather was nice. The water there was like Dimity water, if you know what I'm talking about, crystal clear. You could see a penny on the bottom, and just so much life there. So to have my daughter on the boat, my son, my wife, and a son-in-law to be, and being able to show them all this stuff, and then catching every fish on the list. Some of the fish, some of the people on board had never caught before. So that was one special trip. And my new son-in-law, he's really cool in photography, and he took a panoramic photo, I guess that's what they call it.
Right.
Of the area that we were in, framed it, and gave it to us, and it's on our wall. And it's a constant reminder, a great reminder of that day, that trip.
Well, for as many trips as you've taken, Captain Alan Sherman, for that to be your highlight, it had to be a very, very special day. And I think most of us would fall back on a story like that. One that comes to me right off the top of my head, Captain Fred Morrow, who was my sea daddy, and you know what a sea daddy is. He raised me on the ocean. And and one of my very, very best friends, Captain David Crisp, and myself took an afternoon half day off just for the heck of it. And Captain Fred's Parkinson's, my big daddy, his Parkinson's was advancing at the time, and we knew this would be one of his last trips offshore. And Captain David was reeling up a snapper and got it to the surface, and a shark that we later identified as Mira Lee by the shark tracker, a great white, took the snapper, did a 180, probably 7 or 8 feet in the air, within a foot of the side of the boat, and came down. And it scared the three of us so bad, Alan, that we literally huddled in the middle of the boat. Nobody wanted to go look and see if she was still there. And that's 3 guys with 156 years on the ocean. Wow. And that's how scared we are. I wouldn't take anything for that day. I mean, it was just what a blessing.
I wouldn't have been there for a second longer. I had the engines going, and I'm out of here. Did you ever see Jaws?
But buddy, what a blessing it was to see that. Now, the thing that we've always been so thankful for, the snapper was small, because when the snapper are small, we swing them in with the rod. When the snapper are real big, we wrap our hand around the leader. And
I hear you.
That would have been a whole lot of trouble. But it ended well, and it was a sight that such a tiny percentage of fishermen have ever seen, and I feel so blessed to have taken part in it. Captain Allen, I can't thank you enough for a great report and a great story.
Well, you're very welcome, Rick. I look forward to talking to you again next week.
Thank you, buddy.
You know what Yamaha Outboards love? The genuine formula and consistency of Yamalu marine engine oils. Outboards are subjected to punishing conditions like high loads, salt, and humidity, a mix that automotive oils can't handle. Yamalu full synthetic and marine performance formulas are certified to protect against friction and corrosion for reliable performance every time. Find Yamalu marine oils at your nearest Yamaha Outboard dealer. Locate them at yamahaaoutboards.com/dealers. Yamaha, reliability starts here.
Hey, Raj, being consistent is a mark of a quality product. If you've been Florida's #1 chum for over 10 years, there's got to be a reason.
For 10 years, Tournament Master Chum has lived up to his name. That's why more tournament pros insist on Tournament Master than any other chum. It's the only chum with Menhaden milk mixed right in. That means it gets the scent out faster and deeper than any other brand of chum. It comes in a grind size for every species from kingfish to catching bait. Your fishing time is way too precious to use second-rate chum. Bring the action to you by insisting on Tournament Master chum. It's worth every penny.
When you're ready for the finest in custom-made flat spay or inshore-offshore hybrids, you are ready to meet the Young family in Inglis, Florida. For over 21 years, the Young family has built custom boats one at a time for every type of fishing. Nothing can sneak up on a flat quite like the Gulf Shore flats boats, and I've never fished a better hybrid than the Young 24s and 27s. Rob Young is a naval architect who takes tremendous pride in each and every build for each and every customer that wants their boat custom built exactly the way they want it. Is it time for you to move up? Are you ready to own the finest boat built? Then you need to visit the Young Boat Facility in Inglis, Florida, or check them out online at youngboats.com. Now let's swap coasts. Let's go over to 10,000 Islands and find out what's biting there from Captain Steve Dahl. Steve, how are you?
I'm doing great, Rick. How you doing?
Outstanding, buddy. Absolutely. Well, let's see. I got back from Costa Rica day before yesterday, so I guess I'm okay.
Yeah. It was a good trip out from my understanding, right?
Woo! It was world class, brother. It was world class. I mean, to tell you, my son got his first blue one, about a 300-pounder. 7 or 8 sailfish, mahis to 50, yellowfin tunas. Other than that, we were kind of bored.
Good for you guys.
We had a 10-minute stretch there one day where we didn't get any bites.
Wow.
Yeah.
You need your money back.
That's right, Cap. Tell me about fishing in 10,000 Islands.
Well, it's pretty good. I mean, the calendar says August, but it's acting like October. And
really?
when I mean that, yeah, it's really weird. I mean, especially with, the water temperature's cooling off just a tad now with all the consistent afternoon rains. But the redfish bite's been unbelievable. We usually don't get that. Yeah, we usually don't get that till probably mid-September. The latest, first part of October, after, maybe the first or second cold front that kind of, fires it up. But we've been kind of talking all summer about, the redfish are around, but they're just not bunched up. And we're starting to see fish. We're starting to get multiple fish in some of our spots. And that's got a lot of us thinking that the typical pattern in the month of October is the fish group up and they're generally on the outside islands on some harder bottom, whether it be a shoal or, sand. Then you just kind of make a milk run of spots all the way, depending on where you're at within the region. You just kind of fish the outside islands in these hard bottom areas. And so I got a few of us thinking, and we started doing that, and they're there.
Cool.
The fish are there. They're not the big, female fish that we usually get, in the month of October, but the fish are bunched up. It's not uncommon to get 5, 6 on a point or, these hard bottom areas. And they're readily eating artificials, which is unbelievable. Because this is all October style fishing. And for whatever reason, we're seeing this spurt right now. The only thing I can really attribute it to it is, we've had a really good moon this week and water's flowing really well and water is cooled down just a tad. So maybe that was just enough to get them kind of concentrated. So I'm not asking questions. Sometimes we overthink things as fishermen, and I'm just going to go with the flow and go catch multiple redfish in my region. So that's on the inshore side. The inshore side is still doing pretty good with trout have slowed down a little bit with the high water temperatures.
Yep.
So a lot of guys really aren't fishing for them, but the snook fishing is still very good. We're not seeing the big females like we were in June, but the reality is there's still a ton of fish to be caught. So the inshore bite's doing really well.
I got you. You heard anything from offshore?
Yeah, that as well. So our permit bite still, that's a typical bite we generally get May and June, and that bite's on all summer. I've always talked that, we are one of those regions that really are, I think underappreciated when it comes to permit fishing. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that our fish are offshore as opposed to being on the flats like, our friends to the south in the Keys. But the reality is there's some bruisers. And, there's 30 to 40 pound class fish on these wrecks. and there's nothing to mess around with. These are big, hard pulling fish, and they're schooled up. Obviously 30s and 40s are a little bit more rare, but there are plenty of fish in that 15 to 20 pound range.
Wow.
Yeah, and those fish are still there. And so year over year, we're starting to see that those fish are setting up, not necessarily year round, but they're extending their season, if you will. It used to be kind of May and June type of deal. In the last few years, that's extended well into summer and even into early fall. So makes you kind of wonder, are these fish, at home? And I would like to think they are, because there's, probably less predators there, as opposed to being in 1.5 foot, 2 feet of water on a grass flat somewhere. So I'm liking it. So that's kind of more on the near shore bite, if you will. But the red grouper fishing's been great. And then obviously with this full moon just passed, and the mangrove snapper bite offshore has been great. And they are legitimate footballs. We've had fish, up to 5 to 7 pounds. Some really, really nice mangroves. I mean, it's been a great season for those. Probably the last 12 to 14 months, just seems like every month on the new or full. But it's got to be those peak moon periods. And man, they get fired up offshore. And in the mix, you're getting vermilions and big lanes and some yellowtails too. We're definitely getting a lot more yellowtails than we've ever had. So fishing's good. I mean, it really, really has been good.
Steve, it's funny. We tend to think that we're in charge. We love to think that we're in charge. We're not, in case you haven't noticed. But when we protect some fish, i.e. redfish years ago, i.e. mullet, we pat ourselves on the back that our regulations, brought back the fish. And in those two cases, that's certainly a very valid point. I have no idea where all the mangrove snapper have come from this year, but we've got more being caught this year than any year I can remember. That's inshore, that's offshore, that's East Coast, that's West Coast, shallow, deep, doesn't matter. Everything seems to be holding mangrove snapper right now.
It really is, and even on the typical 6 to 10 inch inshore mangrove snapper on some docks or along the mangrove lines that always steal your bait while you're fishing for inshore species. Those fish are 10 to 12 inches this year consistently, and it's amazing. It really is.
I think I've told you this. I've told just about everybody, but I'm telling you. You go along those docks and you give your customers a brim buster fiberglass brim pole, and you hook a live mud minnow or whatever you use for mangroves down there, live shrimp or whatever. You will have people falling all over themselves laughing about that. That is the most fun you can have with your clothes on.
I like it.
It is. It is a hoot. My grandson and I have done it off my dock a bunch of times now, and we've broken hooks, we've broken lines, we've caught a pile. He caught a 14. That's been our biggest one. But let me tell you what a 14-inch mangrove snapper will do to a fiberglass brim buster pole. He'll bend it all right, I promise you.
Oh, it's in a U shape. For sure.
It's fun, Cap. It's fun. Well, that's a great report, as always, Steve. We appreciate your report so much. Please tell me we can check with you next week.
Oh, always. Looking forward to it.
Thank you, Steve. Captain Steve Dahl from the 10,000 Islands. Let's move up the coast a little bit and see what Greg Stamper's up to. Snooky, how are you?
I'm doing very well, Rick. Good to hear from you.
Good to talk to you. I missed you guys last week. Something fierce. Not having one last week about killed me. Tell me how your fishing's been.
Well, it's that time of year for us. Obviously, anytime we deal with any tropical storms, tropical depression, things get a little bit mixed up. We got a lot of wind and a lot of rain a few days, so that kept most of us off the water except for a few diehards. But those days afterwards, they turned out to be pretty good. The back bays didn't get mucked up too bad. There are some areas that are going to be a little bit dirty. I highly recommend if you still find water that's dirty, most of it's cleaned up somewhat by now, that you kind of move on and look for some cleaner water. Those fish don't like that real dirty, muddy stuff. They like something that they can kind of see through. Even if it's kind of like pee, but you can still see a foot or two, that's okay. I'm just talking about if it looks like a washed out river, it's time to move on. But where we found the clean water, we found trout, we found our snook. The redfish bite was a little bit slower than usual, and we're starting to see a lot of things coming around and coming back. So I think we're going to see a lot more pompano here in our future. If we can get the water out in the front to stay clean, the bite on pompano, even backwaters, has been pretty good. And we're talking about some quality fish, Rick, up to about 4 pounds.
Ooh.
And we're just basically doing the same old as we always do. We're throwing jigs that are just tipped with a little tiny piece of shrimp, and we're working them quickly through the water column.
Gotcha. That's an outstanding report. Have you heard anything from offshore?
Yeah, the offshore guys did have a few days they were definitely not going.
Yeah.
The guys that
sure.
did get out a couple of days did do very well. It's the same old for the most part. A lot of mangrove snappers coming in. Some of these fish are probably 3 to 4 pounds. Nothing crazy. They didn't do any night trips this week. The red grouper bite continues to be very good. And these guys aren't going out past 100 feet, so if they're getting them banged out quickly in 100 feet or less, you know the red grouper fishing's good. I haven't talked to anybody who's really gone out far. I think that slowed down quite a bit after we were done with the whole red snapper thing. But the guys that are in between are near shore folk, as we call. They're still doing pretty good on these permits. They're still small. I'm not sure exactly where them big boys went, but I have a feeling they'll be back around sooner than later. And other than that, they've been getting a little bit lucky here and there with some of those cobias showing up while they're doing the permit fishing and the bottom fishing for those smaller snappers out there.
I got you. I tell you what, I've said it before on this broadcast, and we've been saying it for months. I don't care where in Florida you are. It's been an excellent season for mangrove snapper.
Yes. We're very fortunate down here, too, because most of those big ones that the guys go out for, they go out deep, and they do it at night. And there's just not as much pressure. And it's not like it's structure. It's usually just really nice drop-offs, Rick. And our drop-off here only has to be a couple of feet. It's not like you need to be dropping from, 100 feet to 120. We don't have that around here. You give us something that goes from about 70 to about 74, 75 feet, and that's money.
Gotcha. Outstanding report. Greg, as always, we appreciate it so much. Please tell me we can check in with you next week?
All right, tight lines.
Same to you. Our thanks to Greg Stamper for a great Southwest Florida report. Now, let's move up into the West Central and check in with Captain Ray Markham. Raymond, how are you?
Fantastic.
Good. Glad to hear it. Tell me how the fishing's been. Is the red tide going away at all?
Actually, it's improving considerably from what I've been hearing and what I've been seeing. The most places that I would normally be fishing up in Tampa Bay, I've been fishing more south. And actually, I was told that up inside Tampa Bay, it's improved the best. Now, I had the opportunity to fish with a bunch of guys with Florida Outdoor Riders this last weekend down in Little Sarasota Bay. And down in that neck of the woods, although I saw a few fish dead and floating, we caught snook, trout, redfish, jacks, ladyfish. But bottom line is we caught a bunch of different fish. We probably got, 50 fish in a matter of about 3 hours or so.
Sweet.
Which is not too shabby. Plus, 2 of those fish were on the upper side of limits with redfish at 29 and 26. So not too shabby. An 18-inch trout. So, things are looking up, particularly down there where they were hurt so bad. So I'm looking forward to getting back up inside Tampa Bay and finding out what's going on up there. I realized that they said we had something like 3 million pounds of dead fish that they cleaned out of the bay at the peak of the red tide a few weeks ago. But, these fish do have a tendency to kind of move around with that thing on the back of them. Mm-hmm. And I'm hoping that some of them will come swimming up inside the bay again. So
I wonder, Ray, I almost feel like they have, I don't know, maybe I'm just dreaming, but I almost feel like they learn after a while when they have to leave because of the red tide. As long as it doesn't jolt them too fast and gives them a chance to get out of it, right?
Well, I believe that, but for the same token, I saw that happen probably about 11 or 12 years ago with some pretty bad red tide that we had in this area. And the big trout that we used to have back then never returned. On a regular basis, let me put it this way, it never returned to the places that I would normally find them.
Right.
Okay. So I don't fish every single place. I try to, find places other people aren't fishing so that hopefully can get a little peace and quiet. But unfortunately, it's just a combination of a lot of things. I think it's the additional pressure that we have on the fishery, more people fishing here, and all of that kind of makes it a little bit more difficult finding really big fish. Plus the fact that, we've got so many instruments now with side scanners and everything else that it's like you can sit in your boat and go like, okay, there's a fish 50 feet to the right side of the boat, just cast over there, And so unfortunately for the fish, they have less and less a chance of escaping the wrath of the guys that are trying to take one home for dinner. So, that with that in mind, even though we have some pretty reasonable limits, I believe, for taking fish home, I generally urge my customers just to take what they need for dinner if that's what they're looking to do, and not take fish home to freeze.
Right,
because half the time a lot of that stuff gets in the back of the freezer and becomes a science experiment 6 months down the road, and they go, "What's this?"
Yeah.
Yep.
Have you heard anything from offshore at all?
Excuse me. Yes. We're seeing more and more kingfish starting to move south. They're showing up on the deep wrecks. Most of these guys that are out grouper fishing are fishing anywhere from 100 to 180 feet of water, and doing exceptionally well with big fish. They're still catching mangrove snapper. Some of the guys that are fishing nearshore waters are still fishing for tarpon and doing fairly well with it. And they're catching some triple tail again. So,
good deal.
Little bit of everything, and they are catching a few hogfish again. So that may be a little bit early, but still, they've got a pretty good variety of fish to fish for. When you got 3 or 4 different kinds of snappers that they can catch, some pelagics, a few blackfin tuna, more and more dolphin actually over the last couple 3 weeks, and so it's not all that bad.
Good deal. Good deal. I'm so glad to hear it. I'm especially glad to hear that red tide's easing up. Ray, please tell me we can check with you next week. We appreciate it as always.
Yes, sir. Look forward to it.
Thank you, Ray. Now we're going to the Big Bend to check in with the mayor of Homosassa, Florida, William Toney. Mr. Mayor, how are you?
Doing good, bud. It's quiet down. Kids are back in school. It's hot. It's the end of August, but I can tell you what, the fish has been great up here.
Oh yeah, what are you catching?
Well, I'm just your old regular trout and redfish guide, but the trout bite's been good. Something I want to talk to everybody out there that fishes up here to Big Bend. We had a lot of rain, a couple different storms, so our inshore water is kind of really dark right now. And today had a little bit of sea breeze out of southwest, and what it did, it was create that good little chop on the surface. And for an August trout bite, we limited out in about an hour on some really nice quality fish. Our regulations are really working well in our area. And then the redfish bite, of course, it's from now till about the end of October. It doesn't get any better.
Wonderful, 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 wonderful. That's an outstanding report. Hey, William, I got a question for you. Well,
yep.
Real quick, did you hear anything from offshore first, and then we'll...
Offshore, there's been reports of some people in our area saying there's red tide, and I actually ran out last week to about 14 foot, which is out where sea monsters and out of my realm. It's over my head out that far.
14
but
feet? Oh,
yeah.
Were you scared?
I was scared. I couldn't see land.
Okay.
You know, drops a foot per mile. I was approximately 8 miles west of Cheswiska Tower out there near Hernando County. But what it was, from what I've gathered, out there around 20 foot to 30 foot, there was a lot of dead floating fish, a lot of white old stuff. And there was some red tide that was certified by the FWC south of us in Hernando County, north of Antelope Key, in that area. But then we had Hurricane Fred or Tropical Storm Fred and a hard southwest blow that blew a lot of stuff up in our area. So far, Citrus County and north of us has not been any red tide that the FWC has seen. So, you know, that's what I kind of figured. I didn't see any when I was out there in around 14 to 15 foot range, which is about 15 miles offshore. So it's nothing to, you know, sneeze at. But that one corridor, I guess, which would be where those fish were floating. But as far as inshore grouper bite goes, I tell you what, the guys that are grouper diggers are getting them on live pinfish. I actually had last week in about 10 to 12 foot of water, a guy reeling up a small grunt. We were mangrove snapper fishing, and about a 30-inch grouper come to the top and took it, and it made that 10-pound Power Pro sound like a 22 rifle real quick.
I bet it did. I bet it did. Cause snap, ain't no doubt.
Real quick.
Hey, I got a question for you. All right, you're a lifer like me. This is what we do. It's what we were made for. Give me a best day ever, and why?
You know, I thought about that question earlier because you had said it, and you know, there's so many best days I've always had, but one of my daydreams, back when I was in middle school, about 1980. Up in Waukesasa Bay, north of us, back when winters were like winters, where it got icy and cold.
Yeah,
it was cold. We were out there at our hunting camp, but there was a place, and my best buddy John Locklear and I used to go in this one area and hunt. And down by these old camps, there's an oak tree with a double-barrel shotgun that was grown into the crook of the tree, where it had actually grown around it. And a sign hanging on a piece of chain off of it that said Gun Barrel Creek with an arrow. And so we got in that area. My dad gave us the permission to, you know, hike out there. It's like 3 miles, you know, way back out there in the marsh. And so we had our 22s and 410s and fishing poles and tackle boxes, and away we went. We drug it, and it was cold, frost under breath in the middle of the day, and got back into Waukesasa Bay where Turtle Creek and Gun Barrel Creek come together as a whole. And I remember Mr. Mashburn, he's an older gentleman, and always said, you know, boys, you get back there when it's cold, there'll be more fish you'll ever catch in your life. So we wheel up there with our old ambassadors and, you know, old half-frozen shrimp, and we're fishing off a bank in the middle of absolutely nowhere. And every cast 5 foot in front of us, 50 feet out from us, it was some of the biggest redfish I ever remember catching.
How about
you couldn't hardly even lift, and the line was all, you know, we had cruddy old, you know, this monofilament and half rotten, and it would break. And we'd get some up there, and we caught trout. And I just remember us, you know, having some fish. And what we did, we strung them up on a pole, and we carried on our shoulders like big game hunters all the way back out of there. And everybody's amazed back at camp, and we ate fish. But it was one of those days I'll never forget the rest of my life.
Yeah, that's a great story. That's fantastic. And I remember those old red ambassadors. And do you remember the green ones that were direct drive?
Yep, my grandfather, he was a guide. He had some in his shed, but, you know, they were, you know, I call them thumb snappers. If it got going and you didn't keep your hand on the handle, it'd get you.
It would get you indeed. That hand. I fished in Old Ocean City, snapper and grouper fishing for several years. It was direct drive, and it would go forward or backward, buddy. The way he took line was to back your hand up, and I
back your hand up and don't let it go. It'd be like sticking your finger in a skill saw blade.
You have no idea how blessed I feel to have fished those days, and I know you feel the same. But those are great times. Cap, we appreciate the heck out of it. Please tell me we can check with you next week.
I'll be right here in downtown Homosassa.
We'll be looking forward to it. Thank you so much, Captain William Toney from downtown Homosassa, Florida. All right. Our thanks to William Toney for letting us know everything that's going on in the Big Bend. Now you can't get out of Florida till you shoot out the Panhandle, and that's where we will run into one Captain Tyler Massey. Tyler, how are you?
We're doing good, Rick. How are you guys?
Good. How's fishing?
Fishing's been pretty good. We've had some, decent action inshore and offshore, even some blue water fishing and stuff too. So it's been pretty good all around.
Talk to me about the blue water first. I'm dying to hear it.
So we host a white marlin tournament held in Pensacola, and it was the weekend before last. We missed that one though, but we had some great fishing. We had several boats that had 6 and 7 releases on white marlin, and several sailfish and blue marlin caught. And that's in an area around those fads we've talked about before. Also around an area called the Elbow, dumping grounds, the Nipple, the Spur, just all our normal trolling stuff in the 45 to 65 mile range.
God, that's not too far. That's
been good.
Sweet.
No, it's mostly teaser fishing. That you do catch some pulling your regular spread with your Islanders and whatnot, and rig values, but the teaser fishing's a great way to target those white marlin.
Now, what you call teaser fishing, is that what we call dredge fishing, where they've got two dredges?
Same thing.
Yeah,
two
dredges.
And then we pitch bait, a naked ballyhoo or a live bait of some sort to them.
Now, are you putting mullet on your dredge, or what are you putting on your dredge?
Yeah, some people do. A rigged mullet, split back mullet, or the a lot of people I guess just use the artificial, the straight rubber, on there also. Anything I think to get their attention. If they're coming up and eating it, the natural bait, definitely keeps them a little more interested, I think. But I think they both work pretty well.
Cool. That's really cool. All right, what's going on inshore?
So inshore fishing, flounder fishing's picked up over the last week or so. Fishing around the bridges, fishing around docks, any kind of structure, and anywhere from I'd say 8 to 20 foot of water is going to have some flounder on it. And we're using a Carolina rig, fishing live baits like a bull minnow or a small finger mullet, scaled sardine, we call them LYs or greenbacks or whatever you want to call them, any kind of little live fish bait, and slow dragging that across the bottom. So our flounder limit is increased or the size limit is it's gone to 14 inches from 12, so that's a little bit of a change. And also, I think it's 5 per person as our bag limit now.
Right.
And so the fishing's been pretty good for them though. It's just now getting to where they're showing up, coming from the rivers and heading towards the main bay in the pass. So should be good for another couple of weeks. And also, while you're doing that flounder fishing, mangrove snappers have been all in the same spot. They'll eat live shrimp or any of those kind of fish baits as well.
That's way cool. I tell you what, it's been, August is August. It's usually not great, and it's the worst of the summertime for us, but it actually seems to have held up pretty well this summer, hasn't it?
Yeah, it seemed pretty good. It's the heat's definitely getting to the trout fishing and the red fishing. But that's what you always say. Early morning, late afternoon for those fish, fishing over grass, fishing around dock structures, that kind of stuff. But it's definitely the slower middle of the day when that heat gets up. Everything seems to slow down.
Hey, we've been asking the guys tonight about their best day ever. I would have to guess that being the rod man on a 700-pound bluefin tuna might be your best day ever. Am I right about that?
Yeah, I mean that was pretty incredible. Fishing day for me. We had already caught 3 blue marlin that morning.
Ooh.
I wasn't on the rod for any of those, but the bluefin. We hooked everything before 11 o'clock. So we had 3 blue marlin, hooked the bluefin, and then the bluefin took the rest of the afternoon.
How big was the bluefin?
It was 634 pounds.
Oh, that's sweet.
And it was a 5-hour fight, maybe a little over 5 hours. And it's definitely an incredible fish to catch.
Hey, did you hear about the blue marlin in the Mid-Atlantic 500?
Yeah, those were 2 of them were giants. There was a 950 something and 1100 pounder. I couldn't imagine catching a 900 pounder and then getting beat.
I was going to say, Cap, if I go to the dock with a 900 pounder and then I get beat, I might lose my cool. I mean, I might do it right there.
Man, that's incredible, and some incredible fish. They have some great fishing up there right now.
That's something. Hey, thanks, Tyler. We appreciate it so much. Please tell me we can check with you next week.
Yep, I'll be here, guys. We'll see y'all.
Captain Tyler Massey from out in the Panhandle. We always enjoy his reports. Wow, half a dozen white marlin in a day out there right now. That's really good fishing. We're going to put a wrap on today's report, but first, let's get a word from D.O.A. Lures. Hey, here's news to nobody. It's hot. Man, it's August and we are feeling it. And, of course, that means that the great fish are doing what they always do. The biggest and the baddest of so many species we fish for are headed into deep water in an attempt to cool off. You name it. If it feeds deeper in the water column, it can't refuse a D.O.A. terrorize. It dives straight down and it crawls across the bottom with an action that no deep feeder can resist. Whether it's a crappie holding deep under lily pads or a tarpon rooting around a bridge piling, D.O.A. makes a size and color terrorize they just can't say no to. Flashing that big bright eye in front of any bottom-feeding game fish is just unfair. Well, maybe that's why they call D.O.A. lures the unfair advantage. Hey, you know, it's been a lot of fun this week traveling around the state, and there's been a lot of better reports than I quite honestly expected. It's been summertime, it's August, it's not great, but we still got to fish because that's what we do, right? And I got to tell you, around the Northeast area, it's been good. It's good for flounder and mangrove snapper inshore. It's good for mangrove snapper and grouper offshore. You work your way down the coast a little bit. Kingfish have been doing pretty well. Down in Stewart, another amazing sailfish rally is going on, just coming off of that full moon toward the end of the month, and it's just nuts the way that the sails have been down there all summer long. You get down to Miami, their mahi have pretty well faded out now. They're going to be back soon, but for right now, Miami may not be the place to be. It's mostly hot weather, a few jack crevalles, some mutton snapper, a few mangrove snapper, not much. You go on over to the West Coast, they're talking about an early fall fish-wise. They're seeing snook, they're seeing pompano, and they're seeing permit that they don't normally see quite this early. Head up into West Central. Ray Markham was happy. His red tide's finally going away. The kingfish are biting offshore. William Toney, the captain that never has a bad day, says that his redfish fishing is exceptional. Trout are a little slow with the heat, but there's a handful around. How about the Panhandle? White marlin, half a dozen a day in that tournament, and plenty of blue marlin. So all in all, not a bad week. Hey, this week's report and every week's report is brought to you by Yamaha. Reliability starts here. By Shimano, bringing people and nature back together. By Tournament Master Chum, it's the best chum on earth. By Nosara, Paradise Rentals. By D.O.A. Lures, the unfair advantage. And by Young Boats. You want the finest in flat, spay, and offshore hybrids, you need to check out youngboats.com. For Florida Sportsman Action Spotter Podcast, I'm Captain Rick Riles, and until next week, we will see you on the ring.